Music, dance, theater. It's time to take a seat on the aisle with Tom Alvarez. Hear from performers, producers, presenters, and creators who enrich our lives in the performing arts. Who's on stage? Here is Tom Alvarez to introduce you.
Hello, and welcome to On the Aisle with yours truly, Tom Alvarez. My guest on today's episode is Chris Williams, CEO of the American Pianist Association. Williams has devoted a lifetime to the arts in a multitude of roles, including artist manager, contractor, composer, and performer. Join me now as I go on the aisle with Chris.
Have you ever covered a carpet stain with a rug, ignored a leaky faucet, pretended your half-painted living room is supposed to look like that? Well, you're not alone. We've all got unfinished home projects. But there's an easier way. Thumbtack is the app that makes it easier to care for your home. Pull out your phone and in just a few taps, search, chat, and book highly rated pros right in your neighborhood. Download Thumbtack and start caring for your home the easier way.
Okay, it's time to commit. 2024 is the year for prioritizing yourself. Begin your new smile journey with Byte, and you could start seeing results in just 2 to 3 weeks. Just order your at-home impression kit today for only $14.95 at Byte.com. Byte clear aligners are doctor-directed and delivered to your door. Treatment costs thousands less than braces. Plus, they offer financing options, accept eligible insurance, and you can pay with your HSA FSA. Get 80% off your impression kit when you use code WONDERY at Byte.com. That's BYTE.com. Start your confidence journey today with Byte.
Welcome, Chris. It's great to see you here in the studio, and thank you for being a guest on the podcast today.
Thank you for having me.
And last time I saw you was last year, was it not? And it was sort of a comedy of errors. I interviewed you at a coffee shop at 49th and Penn, and then I had a technical problem. My computer crashed, and we lost the files. And I, with the red face, I had to write you an email and say, "Oh, Chris, guess what?" And, you so patiently and kindly sent me answers to questions. And so for folks who want to hear, we did a pretty lengthy piece, as I recall. Yeah. So folks should check that out on my column, On the Aisle, also called On the Aisle, on my website at tomalvarez.studio, and it's archived. So if you don't mind, I'm going to ask you some of those same questions for people who,
Sure.
who are inundated with media,
Yes.
So first tell me, how long have you been in place?
I've been here about 9 months now, so I am still a relatively new Hoosier, but very much on my way to being a super established Hoosier.
Mm-hmm. And what are your impressions thus far? Last time we talked, you were brand new in town, but they were pretty favorable then. But now that you're settled in and reality has hit.
Yeah, I would say even more favorable. I have to share that one of the most exciting elements to me, and also having come from New York, obviously very passionate about the arts and about live performance. And I've been so excited by the fact that there is so much live performance and art here to consume. I feel almost overwhelmed by it in a good way. I feel like you can go to something new almost every night of the week. There's an incredible variety between dance, music, theater, visual art, etc. So one of my favorite parts right now about Indianapolis is really diving deep into that and getting to know my arts peers and seeing performances, but it's really thrilling that there's so much opportunity to see live performance here. So I've really enjoyed that.
Do you think that's unique to Indianapolis in terms of, well, you lived in New York City for how long?
Sure, for 13 years.
Okay, but you've been in other markets, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So how does Indy stack up with those other markets in terms of, is it that unique?
That's a great question. I think for the population size of Indianapolis, the city itself, and maybe even the metroplex. I don't know if that's a word y'all use, but I would say it's actually quite robust, more so than other peers. When I think about, major piano competition, major violin competition, symphony orchestra, chamber orchestra, this is really stacked up. So I think actually compared to other markets with similar populations, I would say the art scene is quite robust here. So that was, I don't know if a total surprise to me, but now that I'm really in it, it's overwhelming in a good way, all the opportunity that's out there.
Well, we can't forget we also have a flourishing ballet company, modern dance company, there's several actually dance companies, ballet, and an opera company. So that's pretty significant in your experience, is it not?
It's very significant.
Organizations that are also in the black, wouldn't you agree?
I would agree.
That's pretty remarkable, is it not?
It's remarkable, and I should say that among all these organizations, my experience so far, it's been really quite synergetic. I think people are willing to have conversations about partnerships. There's a very friendly and non-competitive, very supportive nature among artistic directors and executive directors and organizations as a whole. So that's been one of the most enjoyable parts to me as well, actually.
Well, so let's talk about APA, American Pianist Association. At one time, it was called the Beethoven Foundation, was it not? Or Beethoven?
That's right. In the late 70s, when it got going, it was the Beethoven Foundation.
And so tell me about what you inherited.
About what I inherited? Well, I inherited something quite fabulous. So the organization, before I came here, I've known of it forever, as long as that I've worked in the classical music business, highly respected nationally and really internationally as well. I am very fortunate to come in a time of APA when the financial health of the organization is quite excellent. 20 years ago, it was really small, and my predecessor and advisor, Joel Harrison, really built it to what it is today and has allowed me to take those reins and really expand it and do new work. So that's really what I came into here, is really a nationally known, respected organization, one of the top competitions in the world for pianists, top in the world, really, in fact, for jazz pianists. And I've come into a good deal, I would say.
And that explains why it is that you chose to come here, correct?
That's absolutely correct, yes.
Yeah. And how did the two of you discover each other, the organization, and how did they find you, and how did you find them?
That's a good question. So, my background was I was working with emerging artists. I was really focused in the classical music genre, and I was running an international competition called Concert Artists Guild. So my skill set really pretty naturally lent itself to this. Basically, Joel and I were actually connected before the process via industry colleagues. He had, sort of been confiding in peers about, who might be a good fit for this role. And my name was recommended to him a lot. I was also contacted directly about the exact same time by the headhunters as well. Again, just being so specialized in working with young artists and competition. I think that's how my name, came up and came to be. Joel really did not have to twist my arm at all because it was such a great job. And I really loved what the organization did and the mission. So that was pretty easy. But that's kind of how we got connected originally and, led me here today.
Give me a sort of a thumbnail sketch of your career. And, well, let's start with your education.
Sure. So, I grew up in Fort Worth, Texas. I started by playing violin and viola, and then piano actually came after, funny enough. I did my undergraduate at the University of North Texas, and I actually have degrees in viola performance and merchandising, sort of a little known fact. And then I moved on to grad school. I went to Yale School of Music. And when I was wrapping up grad school, I started having conversations with my teachers, advisors, the dean of the School of Music, in fact, to say, I think I might want to go other directions than performance. And actually, at the time, the dean of the Yale School of Music, Robert Blocker, encouraged me to consider being an artist manager. And I really had absolutely no idea what that was. And, in sort of quick terms, he described it to me, it's sort of like being a talent agent and you move to New York City and work with artists. And so I thought that sounded like the coolest thing ever. And it is cool in many ways. It's also one of those jobs you find out not totally what you thought it was, but it's certainly been fulfilling for me.
What do you mean by that?
Oh, well, it just sounds like you're going to concerts and, picking out your favorite talents, signing them, and, people are
Sounds
emailing
glamorous,
you.
yeah.
Yeah, it's all
And
much more
in New
cumbersome.
York City, no less.
And in New York City, it all sounds so exciting, but, there's a lot of administrative effort that goes along with it. It's a true hustle to procure engagements for artists, both established and emerging. But it is also a lot of fun, and you do get to see a lot of performances. So that's something I really enjoyed. And yeah, I jumped into artist management right after grad school and then built my career from there.
Yeah, well, managing artists, let's talk about that. Artists, they have a reputation for being difficult, perfectionist, temperamental. Is that too much of a stereotype overall?
It's half of a stereotype, I would say that no artist is created equally. So they all have different strengths. Some of their strengths can lie in the sort of entrepreneurship. Some might really be all in the imagination or creative scope of the artist. It's true, they're typically not the most organized group of individuals, so it does come with those challenges. But it really depends on the artist. Sure. I've had some that I thought, I could hire you as an agent. You're so organized and such a, you're so on it. But it just sort of depends. So it's all directions.
So
really.
Do you wear a lot of hats as an agent as well? Like, are you like a confidant? You like a psychologist? Does it go to that extent depending on the person as well?
That's a great question. Absolutely, yes. Depending on the artist, there might be a decent amount of talk therapy involved. Some artists are the opposite. They're, for better or worse, out to lunch. You don't actually hear too much from them. So it sort of depends. But yeah, there's quite a number of artists that, they need that talk therapy.
How many would you say that you represented over those years?
Oh gosh, I think over 100 now, probably. Really? Yeah, that might be a good guess because, I started in for-profit rosters, which transient would be a strong word for those, but you're adding and dropping is the reality. And then the last 5 years when I was at Concert Artists Guild, that was a very transient roster because we added about 5 new artists every year. And I'm thinking about, I should probably say that's a bit cumulative of artists and projects that I've booked and managed. But yeah, it's been a lot now.
Tell me about some of the artists you represented. Some of your favorites.
Some of my favorites. Oh gosh, that's so funny. Okay, well, when I came into the business and was in for-profit, I was really fortunate to start with a really high level of artists, including Leon Fleischer, Richard Good, Sir Simon Rattle, Jamie Laredo, who's artistic director here of the violin competition, in fact. So I was really sort of connected at a high level early in my career, which is really great. Try not to play favorites, but I will say Richard Good taught me the joy and beauty of a piano recital and really what the piano can do. So I owe that to him. My falling in love with piano is really because of Richard Good. My next roster, I was looking after senior and some mid-career artists. One of the big ones was Orpheus Chamber Orchestra. They were a really fabulous group, so famous for their democratic process and working without a conductor. So that was always really inspiring. Also, I love from that roster Ataka Quartet, who've recently won a few Grammys and are a very innovative string quartet. And some other greats as well, like Sir James Galway was on that roster. It was really fabulous and always enjoyed that. And some wonderful pianists as well, including Vadim Kolodenko, who's the 2013 Clyburn winner, and Javier Perianis, who's a wonderful Spanish pianist. So loved all them. And, last but not least, Concert Artists Guild. I had so many artists there. Oh gosh, I can't go into the mode of favorites in case any of them hear this. But I will say that there's an argument to say that my time at Concert Artists Guild as a whole was my favorite because I really enjoy working with emerging artists.
Why?
Well, it's fun to watch them develop and find themselves, kind of find their creative voice and, figure out, who they want to be, what they want to program, how they want to be active in any given community, how they want to contribute to the world with art and music.
And they also gain from the benefit you have of all that experience with all those other famous artists. And you sort of have you can advise them, I would think, in a way that helps them cut to the chase about practical things that they could do. Is that right?
I mean, look, I try, I always say that as a talent agent or artist manager, about 5 years in, you think you know everything and you are prepared to manage anyone, and you're better than any manager that ever was. Mm-hmm. And then 10 years in, you sort of realize you don't know anything. So, some people ask me how to make it, and I'll say, gosh, I don't know. Who knows? And they'll say, aren't you one of the country's preeminent experts on this? And I'll say, yeah, supposedly. But I think, the reality is, of course, all of that experience is really helpful to me. And it's really a coincidence that I started with this senior level and sort of got younger as I went along. I didn't realize, what I know now, which is to manage and advise and help launch these young artists. All the experience working with the more established artists was really important for me to kind of understand how I might do that and get there. So yeah, that's all help for sure.
So I mentioned artist temperament. What's the temperament of an ideal agent?
Oh gosh, that's funny.
Manager.
That's funny. Well, firstly, I would say someone who is, this is an answer. I'll get to temperament, but someone who's extremely organized, because being a successful artist manager agent involves a lot of follow up and a very sort of diligent way of being in touch with presenters and always selling, really, and always after them, always trying to procure those engagements. And, I always say for every 100 tries, I get a lead. So, you're doing mass volumes of communications, personalized communications. So it's a very, very heavy workload. I think for temperament, patience is really key, and it's really important to develop a skin for being an agent, because you experience a lot of rejection. I mean, epic. So you're going to email 100 people about an artist in a given day. They're all going to tell you no. And then the artist is going to say, you're not doing anything for me. So you're going to get hit by people on both sides of the equation. Now, it all depends on the artist. Some artists recognize, oh, you're really trying for me. Or when you do get the gig, it's just like a huge celebratory moment. That's what you're hopeful for. But I think a great agent has patience and also enough savvy and kindness not to, blow up at people. I think some managers and agents are famous for being overly sassy or aggressive and advocating for their artist. I think there's sort of a
like the
balance.
Pushy agent.
Like the pushy agent, I think the agent, the role is
hold
tricky.
up in a Times Square office.
Well, and some, are up in a Times Square office after COVID. No, there's no more of that really, but there was, yeah. So, I would say patience and savvy serving a good agent well.
Do you believe in the concept of quiet persistence?
Absolutely, because that would be me. I'm always doing, gentle reminders and thought of yous. And
I believe that is, in my own career and experience, I've learned as a fundraiser and various other things that I've done that, that's an art.
Yeah.
It's developing relationships.
It is, exactly.
Yeah, and doing it in a sincere manner.
Yep.
Talking about fundraiser in your present capacity, I think I asked you, are you a good fundraiser?
I like to think so. I have sort of a non-traditional background, having come from for-profit management. It happens to be that my last role for the last 5 years was in nonprofit, which was my first opportunity to sort of straddle this artist management and development and really all aspects of nonprofit.
And how did you gain your stripes in the nonprofit? What were you doing?
Well, so that was Concert Artists Guild was, since we specialize
right. You mentioned that earlier.
Yeah, we specialize in launching emerging musicians. So because the artist fees aren't big and the commissions aren't big, you need additional support from people who are very excited about supporting classical musicians to make it all work. And so, I think my career and background as an artist manager has served me well in that regard, because it is, as you just mentioned, all about relationships, all about understanding what people need, what excites them, and what would be meaningful for them to invest in. So I think that background has really helped me sort of create an approach that is both genuine and savvy when it comes to fundraising and development.
Well, Chris, I imagine based on your track record that it's obviously that you feel passionately about what you do and the artists that you represent. You must be quite successful at communicating that passion.
Well, I'd like to think so. I always tell people I'm a true art lover, everything from the traditional to the avant-garde. I'm often telling people that I pride myself in being a great audience member because I come to things prepared to appreciate it and really respect my peers. And I truly believe in the healing power of the arts. It certainly has been a healing mechanism for me. And I love art in all its forms and capacities. So it does make it easy to talk passionately about it for that reason.
Well, talk passionately about the APA. How is it? Why is it important?
So, interestingly enough, and some people don't know this, pianist is really one of the most difficult avenues in terms of any instrumentalist. On the classical side, you're often quite alone in these practice rooms for 6 hours a day, 10 hours a day, whatever they do, not maybe getting too much interaction with the outside world. You do have some chamber music opportunities, but largely, you spend a lot of time alone. And then when it comes to this particular market in America, the American market tends to favor European artists or other foreign artists.
Why is that?
Well, I'm still cracking the code a bit on that. It's funny. I was told early on in my career, hey, if you're talking to LA Phil, don't tell them what your artist is doing with New York Phil. Tell them what they're doing in Europe, even if you think it's a lesser known music director or orchestra. And that was advice that actually served me quite well. I think there's this idea that, the American musician is very athletic and the international musician is very poetic. And especially in Europe, I think the way they listen is different, perhaps. Europeans have these big careers here, but Americans rarely have big careers in Europe. So this is all to say that, and it's part of the reason that the Beethoven Foundation, before being called APA, was started, was to support American pianists in classical music genre for this reason, because they wanted to give them a better shot at competing on the international stage in international competitions.
Well, that really interests me. I mean, that makes complete sense, and you're educating me, but because there seem to be parallels with opera and ballet as well.
I would imagine so.
And symphony musicians.
Yeah, and if you...
The art forms they seem to be more elevated in certain ways in Europe, or at least perceived that way.
Yes, as you say, at least perceived that way. And, a lot of artists that I've managed who are either based in Europe or spent time there, they would probably communicate to you that they felt even more appreciated in Europe. Having said that, I can tell you the artist fees are better here, so they might be quick to recognize that as well. But, and then jazz didn't come to APA until later, actually, which has been really one of the most exciting elements to me personally, because the jazz genre is actually newer to me. It's not a zone that I've worked in as intensely, so it's an opportunity of growth for me and to learn. I have been working within a presenting network that presents lots of jazz, so there's many players I know, but nonetheless, it's really not my true background.
Was that the attraction for you coming here too, the opportunity to learn about jazz?
The opportunity to learn about jazz was a big aspect. Yes, that was fascinating to me. And gosh, I've had so much fun doing that. And even in a short time, I feel I know so much more than I did. I'm still climbing the tip of the iceberg, but that was a really attractive element to me. And additionally, I should say, an attractive element was my desire to be involved in a community where I felt like I could make impact. New York City is a really big market with a lot going on. And so really it was the Indianapolis community as well that intrigued me.
So you feel you get more of a hands-on in terms of your community participation? I know when we talked, one of the first questions I asked you was about your short-term goals, and you said that to be more of a presence in the community. How's that working out for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, I should share that, upon my arrival here, most of our planning in terms of any, concert performances in particular and some community engagement was already in place. So, as we look sort of towards the 25-26 season and beyond, as where you'll really start to see more of the, Chris Williams touch, I would say, in terms of our overall presenting. Having said that, as we look towards this cycle of the competition, this classical cycle, we will have some new partnerships that we're involved with that we hadn't before, namely with IPS, in fact, and we'll be doing new activities there.
Such as?
We're still actually ruminating and working on exactly what it will look like, but definitely our pianist, each of the finalists will ultimately have their own visit into some of those schools.
So outreach.
Yes, absolutely, exactly. So that's where they'll be going.
Because that's a great interest of mine, developing those future audience that also include the marginalized, people of color.
Yes.
And folks who, can't even afford an instrument, their parents can. And that sort of thing. I had a really nice conversation here on the show with Kevin Lynn about that very same thing. The way the symphony partners with the Metropolitan, the youth organization, the students, and they work side by side with the musicians. So you're going to do that sort of in a sort of a through your musicians and visits. Is that right?
Exactly. And I appreciate what you're touching upon. We are really, desiring to be inclusive at APA is a part of our values, and think about the communities and those that we're serving. We want to partner with those communities and any who we are present with in terms of our community engagement, and really make our best efforts to create a sense of belonging. And, when it comes to the matter of diversity, equity, inclusion, it's really top of our strategic plan.
I point out to people, it's not just sort of social engineering. It's the whole point is that we've got to develop newer audiences, younger audiences.
Right. Yes.
And the demographics are changing in this country. Latinos are going to be the largest minority here within another 10 years or so.
Yeah.
I live on the west side, and I live in a predominantly African American, but more so Latino neighborhood now.
Yeah.
And I see all these young people walking around, and I'm thinking, I hope someone harnesses all that talent, energy that's got to be there. So those are kind of places you want to go to.
I mean, absolutely. I feel that we want to, as I say, be a place of belonging for all people and all audiences. As I look at some of the demographic makeups of Indianapolis, as you say, there is a sizable Latino community, Black community. It's important that we create a space that everyone feels welcome. And the reality is that, art is for everyone. The repertoire of the piano is broad and features many voices, many stories. And I want this whole community.
Inherent with your jazz program for sure. I mean, right?
Well, yeah, and it's really
there's Latin jazz, and jazz came from Black roots.
Yeah, Afro-Cuban jazz. I mean, it does have Black roots, and it really belongs to them. In fact, I mean, that's the reality and the history of the genre. And again, so excited to be a part of it and to get to experience that new genre. In fact,
speaking of jazz, have you since become aware of, or were you already aware of the Indiana Avenue heritage, jazz heritage?
So that's a great question. I wasn't aware until I got here, but now I've, of course, been made aware.
Isn't it amazing?
It is, and the history is quite special. And yeah, it really makes sense that we are here in Indianapolis for that reason. I guess now that we're talking about it, something that would be interesting to know now that I'm thinking about it is if they connected those dots when they actually brought in jazz as part of the program. Now that we're talking, I should look into that, because this really is a fitting place. And people often ask, well, why are you in Indianapolis? And it's really is a great tie-in given the history of jazz here. So I think a perfect fit.
Originally, why was Indianapolis chosen originally with the Beethoven Foundation?
I have only the slightest pitch there, which is simply that the founders were from Indianapolis.
Curtis Clark, I knew.
And Victor Borga.
Okay.
Yes. So,
really?
So they came here, and their pitch was, we have ties here, and it's more central. And that's all I really know, in fact. And I think it's awesome that it's here because, again, this is a community that you can really make impact, and APA can be really involved. It's not to say that we couldn't in New York City or somewhere like that, but, it might be tougher is the reality. So I think it's a great spot.
Well, let's talk about your national scope. How far-reaching is it, actually?
Well, it's very
Do
far-reaching.
you have people on your board from all parts of the country, or how does the...
That's a great question. So most of our board is Indianapolis or Central Indiana based. We do have some board members that are based in either Ohio or maybe Illinois, Chicago. But that's a great question because in our strategic plan calls for building a national advisory board. So we're currently in the process of that. It's really sort of very much in the beginning stages, but, something on our mind is sort of a two-part board, one that is more, philanthropic and the other that is more artistic. So we hope to have, national supporters that are contributing to APA in a way that supports our programs, but also artists that will advocate for APA, famous jazz and classical pianists, and carry our name with them.
Well, yeah, that's across the board. I'm finding that in my own case as an arts writer and covering the arts for all the years that I've been here, Indianapolis has really developed as an entertainment center, in my view. I have a bird's eye view because I cover everything.
Right.
And I've seen the quality of artists, the caliber of artists that come here on a regular basis and the choices that people have. It's pretty extraordinary.
It's really extraordinary. I mean, like I said, I was in New York, which you get an opportunity to see all the best of the best touring artists. And I've been so pleased with what I've been able to
You don't have to go to New York.
No, I don't.
Now.
I'm not even messing with it.
I mean, have you been to the cabaret yet? I mean, good grief. They don't have anybody on that stage who isn't a Tony winner or someone who's won a Tony recently.
I mean, it's very impressive. I actually heard at the cabaret that even Brooke Shields came to a workshop her show. Okay, yeah, which I think that says a lot. I plan to see this month Dee Dee Bridgewater will be there, who was actually, I believe, MC and involved with APA and other aspects.
They have their jazz series too.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I mean, many of the same goals that you have in terms of their programming are similar to what you guys are doing. But so how do you get the word out with a national organization? I'm sure you have to keep an eye in your fundraising and marketing, which should go hand in hand.
Right.
To put those tentacles out there and truly make it a national organization. Is that what your goal is, to widen the audience, if you will?
Yes, absolutely. And those are all excellent observations. Part of that effort, of course, is marketing, and public relations are big. There's also some other grassroots efforts that are really important. There's industry conferences that are gatherings of presenters, agents, tastemakers. We're increasing our presence at all of those. There's, half a dozen or more a year. And, there's also, the talent that you're producing,
Of course. They're your ambassadors.
They're your ambassadors. Exactly. So we want to do our very best to make sure that we're sourcing, the best talent.
When they leave here after the competitions, like the violin competition, you give them a jump start. You give them a huge prize. You get contracts for them as well?
Correct. Yes.
Wow. And so immediately they're just right out of the chute. And they're
right out of it.
So as they go along, you can drop those names that they got their start here.
Exactly. Yeah. And so we want to produce, obviously, the best laureates and winners possible. And then also the idea is, yes, that they carry the APA name with them forever. And in fact, in their bio forever. Wow.
You've got so much in common with Glenn Walk at the International Violin Competition.
We do have crossover, and I absolutely love Glenn. It's funny. I think that, speaking with him about this, I think that he was one of my first bookings starting in the artist management business, because I actually looked after a group called ECHO, East Coast Chamber Orchestra, which is the resident group for the violin competition. A lot of the violin section is made up of laureates. So I think that working with Glenn was one of my first bookings ever in the business. And I just adore him. And can't give away too much too soon, but, we are hopeful to do some stuff together in the future. So to be continued.
Fantastic. It's worth mentioning because along these lines of partnerships.
Yes.
I know that you mentioned at one time you want to do partnerships.
Yes, I do.
We'll get into that, but there's a big one coming up, a really exciting one. I was invited to a so-called reveal party. The Indianapolis Symphony announced, along with Indianapolis Ballet, that they're doing a production of Romeo and Juliet for 3 days in May. Yeah, so that's pretty amazing. And,
That is amazing.
and I remember Kevin Lynn at that party saying, it seemed like a no-brainer to me, they're right down the street, you know?
Totally.
Well, because of budgetary reasons, they dance, it's expensive to hire an orchestra.
Man, is it expensive to hire an orchestra, especially a union orchestra, doesn't come cheap. And the symphony is also a fabulous sounding orchestra. So, there you have it.
But so it's a two-pronged effort. You want to have a more national presence, but you also want to keep an eye on the community that you're involved in. Right?
Absolutely, yes.
Can they really ever be equal, though? I mean, is it possible?
Yes, Tom. I think they can, actually.
Yeah.
I think that they go hand in hand. We want to see, in the future as we evolve our Indianapolis identity incorporated, how should I say? We want the city of Indianapolis incorporated into our own identity, and we want nationally people to really tie together that American Pianist Awards occurs in Indianapolis and think of it as a piano destination. So I think there's a synergy between the two, actually.
I'm so happy you're saying this because this is my ulterior motive for having you on the show. Because part of what I want to do with the show is cheerlead Indianapolis as a cultural attraction.
Yeah.
That, hey, if you live 3 hours away, you've got a lot going on here. You don't have to go to Chicago.
That's true.
Yeah. And, people fly in now to see cabaret shows or the Palladium. I mean, it's just it's not that big of a deal anymore because we are in the center of the United States and so on and so forth. So, yeah.
Yep.
The reason I asked you that, I just wanted you to reinforce that, it's perfectly possible.
Yes, it is totally possible. And in fact, it will be. Yeah. That's what I will say.
Are you involved at all in organizations, or are you consulted, or do you offer your opinions? Do they reach out to you, the Convention Bureau or Visit Indy or any of those organizations that promote tourism?
Well, it's funny.
Do you go to meetings? Are there people of you who gathered together and kind of brainstorm, how do we get the word out about Indy being a cultural attraction?
That's an interesting question. So actually recently I had conversations with IDDC who had told me about a campaign.
And who is that?
So it's funny you should mention I recently had a conversation with the Indianapolis Destination Development Corporation. They have a campaign called In Indiana, but they actually have something else as well that they were doing and may continue called Hoosier by Choice. And it was actually interviewing and featuring people who moved from other markets or regions to Indianapolis and sort of featuring them and interviewing them, asking, how'd you end up here, and tell us what's fabulous about Indianapolis and how you came here. So it's possible that I may do a piece like that with them in the future. I think that series might be on hold.
Well, you're a likely subject right here.
Yes. Absolutely. Well, and it's funny. Moving from New York City, I can share with you that when I had told people I was coming to Indianapolis, my friends from the South and the Midwest, they responded immediately to that with understanding and saying, oh, that's so wonderful. And, totally get it. What a great opportunity, and open skies and better cost of living. And, it all made so much sense to them. But I will share with you when I was, telling people that were from Massachusetts or New Jersey or Maine like that, they were a little more confused. That's not to say they had some negative line to give or something pointedly bad to say about Indianapolis, but the reason I share that is simply because, this whole Hoosier by Choice campaign, when that was sort of mentioned to me, I came to realize, that makes a lot of sense, because it's actually not so easy to get someone to move from New York City or from New England, the Northeast, to Indianapolis.
Haven't they read the New York Times and all the great press Indy's received over the last, decade?
Look, I don't know. I mean, maybe if I were
people
from
read?
Yeah.
No, knows? I mean, but there's still that regional kind of prejudice that still exists around this country. It's kind of like
totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And people sort of, I've mentioned it before as well. I tire of this notion that, we're just someplace you pass through or fly over, that there's nothing really going on here. But there's sort of a snobbery that will always exist, I think, in certain quarters.
Probably, but I have hope that those perceptions might change a bit. And hey, we all know that if you actually do fly into this airport, it's an awesome airport.
So I'm going to shift to something completely different. You're also, I mean, part of your job, I would expect, is presentation.
Yes.
So tell me about that part of your, you're an artist because you're a musician and you come from you also have that in your background. So I would presume you have a really good artistic eye. What's important to you in presenting your artists?
That's a great question. I mean, right now, actually in our current fiscal year, we have a series called Grand Encounters that is a series of presentations, either former winners or touring artists that we present. We do those at various venues right now, including Indiana Landmarks, the Historical Society, and Jazz Kitchen for our jazz presentations. I think as I look towards the future and think about the makeup of those presentations, one consideration, firstly, I would say, is our own laureates and our past winners, our own. I want to lean into that more because they consider Indianapolis their second home.
Wow.
And additionally, so
there's a sentimental attachment there, right?
There's a sentimental attachment, and it's really synergetic among the whole APA family. And what I mean by that is, our supporters and stakeholders have made significant investments into these artists. So I really want to be bringing more of them back to feature them, to say, hey, look how they're doing. Wow, look at how your investment changed the life of these individuals.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, so I want to do more of that. I think there's still consideration too for, guest artists, but it's also thinking about, again, back to inclusivity in our community and, what will really resonate and be meaningful there. I can share with you that as I look towards the future, a few things that are on my mind as well are trying new spaces, unusual spaces. I mean, the graveyard. A broken down warehouse, the cornfields,
Oh my God, Crown Hill.
Yeah.
They've done organ recitals in that cathedral.
I mean, I don't
I could
know.
see chamber music in there, but piano would be fabulous.
Yeah. So I'm thinking of, what are the sort of experiential opportunities might we offer our concert goers and audience members? And also in thinking about developing the next generation of audience goers as we think of Gen Z. I don't know what's earlier than them now, but and thinking about Gen Z is, I always say you want younger audiences, meet them where they are. And I mean that quite literally. So, I would like to start a sort of next gen series that maybe shows up at Square Cat Vinyl or Radio, Chatterbox, and do some more crossover that would appeal to a younger audience to get them to know APA.
It's such a great idea.
Yeah, I mean, I've noticed.
Break down the notion that it's inaccessible and that it's elitist and
sure
and all. Well, at least the classical, maybe not the jazz series as much, but the classical. Certainly.
Right. So, I mean, look, and especially in classical music, there's, some level of elitism that I probably can't deny. Having said that, this music is beautiful and it's for everyone. And, even in classical music, we're starting to see new voices come to the forefront. For example, our new artistic partner, Michelle Can, champions works of Florence Price and Margaret Bonds. So even in classical music, there's a lot there that I think is more inclusive that we just haven't heard yet.
Are you familiar with the conductor, composer Steve Hackman, who's coming to the ISO?
I am, and actually, I've seen. I would like to see more, but I've seen one Uncharted performance, and it was absolutely fabulous.
Coldplay?
This was Stravinsky and Drake.
Oh,
and
yeah.
It was so sophisticated. It was fun. It was beautiful. It was serious. It was everything.
I asked you about that, but I wondered if there's a Steve Hackman in your ranks, a classical pianist who loves to sort of do hybrid.
That's a great question, and I've actually been thinking on that.
When I say hybrid, like Steve, a fusion of different genres of music.
Right. Well, that's an awesome question because, as I think of those series that I told you that would be in the smaller spaces for young people, that's exactly what's on my mind. Who does that kind of work? I have to say he's quite unique. I mean, I can't really think of someone who does it and does it that well.
I'm sure he knows somebody. I'll ask him.
Yeah, you're right. I should. That's actually a great idea. The way he does it is so sophisticated.
Actually, I can put a bee in your bonnet. There's a young man who visited here recently, who was in his last Khalil Overton.
Okay.
So you check him out. He went to Berkeley, I believe. He's a pianist, musician, does a couple. He's also a singer. He sings with Steve, but
Nice.
he's interested in performance arts, really kind of edgy, avant-garde stuff.
Yeah. Well, that would be
That's kind of
interesting.
what you're talking about, isn't it?
Yeah,
Something
we
like
haven't
him?
pushed it that
He's also
far.
African American, so he's very sensitive to representation.
Yeah.
That's important to Steven as well.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to definitely look into him after this.
Well, why not brainstorm a little while you're sitting here?
Yeah. Exactly. That's perfect.
So tell me about what's coming up. You've got a lot of stuff coming up, right?
Yeah. So, our cycle for classical is really just now getting started. We'll be presenting Sarah Davis Buchner at Indiana Landmarks in the upstairs space, which we'll set as a cabaret setting, which will be interesting.
Oh, that big, beautiful former church sacristy
Right.
with the dome ceiling. It's like beyond.
It's quite amazing, actually.
Yeah.
So we'll be presenting Sarah in May, and she was actually our first ever winner of the Beethoven Foundation Award. And it'll be a really interesting concert because it's about her experience as a trans person in New York coming of age.
Interesting.
And it's a one-woman show, and it'll be beautiful, and there will be...
Speak of edgy,
Yeah.
not because it's a trans performer, but just the
Sure.
whole idea is just so
Yeah, and it will be...
untraditional. I love that.
Yeah, it's probably one of the lesser traditional in our history, and welcoming her to this community is so important. She's actually a personal friend of mine. I knew her from New York, so I really am excited to have her on the ground here.
That's fabulous. This is way off the subject, but since you're sitting here, I really want to take this opportunity. I presume you knew Marianne Tobias.
I know who she is, absolutely,
Okay.
but in the community, but I did not know her personally.
Oh, I thought maybe you had.
No, it's just
that you
before my
crossed
time.
paths because she, as you know, is a concert pianist, and I thought that she
Right.
was she a supporter of APA?
She was a big supporter of APA.
I thought as
and it's,
much.
Yeah,
I
a
thought
big
as
loss
much.
for us in the community.
Well, she loved musicians generally, or
Yeah.
was all about promoting musicians, and I think she was one of the big donors for the prize for the violin competition.
She was, and she also, I believe, donated piano to Eskenazi Hospital, and part of APA's programs are our pianists
That's
go and
right.
perform as part of her music program there. So
I had forgotten that. And how often are they there?
officially 5 times a year.
Wow.
I should say actually 5 times every other year, although in our new APA, we might have more level of activity there. We'll see.
Do you still do closed circuit of the performances in the lobby to rooms?
Yes, exactly. They're streamed to the rooms, which is really wonderful for...
She gave that piano, by the way, to Eskenazi.
Right. Yeah. So...
Yeah, well, I also, on a humorous note, and I know that if she's listening, that she would laugh right along. If you're going to do a graveyard, make sure it's Crown Hill, because that's where she's interred. She would love that. I know she would.
I'm glad she would have the sense of humor for that. That's great.
Exactly. Okay, so those are your programs coming up. Tell me about your vision for APA. I mean, we've already touched upon it. You want to make a more national presence. You want to really make more of a difference in the community. You're really intentional about representation, building new audiences. What have I left out?
Well, I would just say that, you know, these pianists that we nurture, they are really the stars of the equation. And something that's on my mind based on my years of experience before coming here and thinking about the future of the music profession, being a performer, a pianist, I can't wait to really sort of instill in these young artists, you know, concept of really creativity. I think now more than ever, there's really more possibility than there has ever been, but it requires some outside of the box thinking, if you will, and you have to sort of create your own path now as a professional musician. The traditional paths of just being a concerto soloist or recitalist, it's not that they're not there, but they're more limited. So I can't wait to work with these artists to help them tap into their creative scope, because my experience is working with young pianists. Usually they come in with somewhat of a narrow view of what their life might look like or what they might do. But to me, a success story is someone leaving the program saying, you know, I got to be involved in the Indianapolis community and it inspired me that I love working with children and I'd like to start my own nonprofit, my own festival, my own concert series, whatever, you know?
You want to turn them into entrepreneurs as well.
Kind of. I
that's
prefer the word
smarter.
creator.
I find a lot of artists are entrepreneurs by necessity.
Absolutely.
I
Yes.
know a lot of artists who do their own marketing, who've learned how to do social media and do their own graphics and on and on and on.
Yeah.
You know, you wonder why these days that there isn't more training when these folks, but they're probably too busy practicing. They don't have time to take extra classes in marketing and development.
Yeah, no, there's not a lot of space. I mean, the conservatories and music schools are, trying to amp up these programs regarding entrepreneurship, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
But even still, when I have been working with these young pianists post-conservatory, I can't think of one that wasn't in need of a healthy amount of professional development, that they weren't necessarily receiving their education. So professional development programs are something that we will be developing, and we're excited to fill that space for them.
Mm-hmm. Do you stay in touch with all the people that you've met, all the artists on a regular basis?
Oh, gosh. Yes and
Are
no.
you like a mentor, in other words?
Yeah, I mean, gosh, since I've been here,
Like a protective papa?
I am. Like, my artists are the kids I never had and will never have. Thank you. Yeah, I am in touch with them. Not all of them, obviously. Thanks to social media, it gives me an opportunity to keep up with a lot of the past artists that I've worked with. And some, and by some, I mean quite a lot, actually, still call on me for advice and for, my take on this, that, and the other. And I always enjoy that. It's really flattering, actually, when I'm seen that way, of course. And so I try to keep up with them as much as I can, but with the given
And
what
once
I've got
again,
going on.
I see a parallel with the kind of work that you do and what Michael Feinstein does with his Songbird Foundation, with his academy. He brings in those 40 high school students every year from all around the country, and he's all about helping them establish careers, and they all network.
Right.
And they have this, it's become quite extensive after 10 years of doing that. You know? The impact that you can have on young artists is pretty, you don't take that for granted, do you?
Oh, I don't take it for granted at all. And, you're speaking with them and they have these big dreams. And, while I never performed or played at the level of the APA pianists who are just world class, I do know the feeling of being a performer and having a dream and of what I would like to do with music and performing. And it's vulnerable because there are no guarantees. It is show business, in fact. So there's a lot of mystery there. And I don't take lightly that I serve as an advisor to these young musicians.
So I want to know more about Chris Williams, the person. What's a normal day like for you? You're not a workaholic, are you?
Oh, yes, I am. So that's pretty much, pretty much my day. And then, I don't think that it's work, but I really do love arts. And like I said, live performance.
I know that you put in a lot of FaceTime. I've run into you several times, but I suspect that you told me previously that you want to put FaceTime in the community.
I do.
You want to reach out to people.
I do. And
so I mean, it sounds like you're just a natural people person anyway.
Yeah. Well, and I should say, some of their outside interests are, I'm a foodie, so really enjoying exploring.
What are some of your favorite restaurants in Indy?
Oh, gosh. I love Bluebeard. Is excellent. It really reminds me of Brooklyn, so I like that a lot. Patachu, any of her restaurants, I think are excellent. Really enjoyed them. Lately, I've been hanging out at the Fountain Room on Mass and
down
Mesh
near the
as well.
Bottle Works.
Yeah, and Bottle Works.
I was there once. I really liked it.
Yeah, Modita, which is a Bottle Works, is very fresh. I like it a lot. So.
Well, that's the big compliment considering where you came from.
Yeah,
there's that
I
whole
enjoyed
Brooklyn cuisine thing too.
Yeah, Brooklyn is very.
Is that still?
Yeah, they kind of have their own. I feel like Brooklyn was at the forefront.
There are all
of this.
these James Beard winners that come out of there.
Oh, the food scene in Brooklyn.
And someone
is
here
insane.
won one of those. Was compared to the Brooklyn chefs.
Yeah. So I've enjoyed that. And
what do you think about Indy physically? Where do you live?
I actually live downtown, and I am a downtown advocate. So I actually live almost basically right off the Circle. I've really enjoyed it.
Wow.
I wanted to be in sort of a more urban environment because I was coming from New York, and I thought that would be a potentially a smoother transition for me, and to have a little bit of street life. I'm a little, I'm not off the beaten path per se, but maybe slightly compared to Mass Ave. So some days I wish I was able to step on Mass Ave a little bit quicker. Most days I'm happy to have a little distance. It's a lot quieter. I do enjoy the circle itself. When I moved here this summer, they did spark.
So are you seeing more people walking dogs? Because that's a good sign that a community is becoming more urban. It's downtown anyway.
That's
at least in Indy.
That's a great question.
Or
Tom.
runners or joggers.
Yeah, I see. So I see all of the above. You know, my building has its own sort of fake dog park at the very bottom of it. So there's clearly a need for dogs. I see dogs all over my floor in my building. So
they have
there's
inside.
That.
They have a dog park.
Not inside. It's outside, but it's attached to the building.
I don't want to give away where you live exactly, but it's
new
to me.
220 Meridian. Anyone can look it up. That's fine.
I never heard. I never heard of the dog park in the middle. Is it like in the center of what's it called? A courtyard.
Well, it's not in the center. It's on the side of the building. So if you're so curious, you could walk by it. You might miss it.
Yeah.
And I think that they're building a restaurant there. So maybe that'll go somewhere else.
Oh, cool.
I had to tell you that I am a cat person. So, you know, don't get me wrong. Dogs are adorable. Love, playing with the dog for a minute.
The choir. Here,
Yeah.
I have 2 kitties.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm not noticing the dogs as much, but yes, I do see that. And I've really enjoyed downtown. I predict, so far as I can see it, I predict staying there for the future.
Okay. Do you like what you're seeing in terms of development of this community? Or you keep an eye on that?
Yes, I am. And, in fact, in first moving here, I was sort of made aware that, the pandemic had been hard on downtown as it has been on,
Oh,
other
sure.
urban
And,
areas.
that was something important that I wanted to put on the list of things I wanted to talk to you about. So from where you sit and, the fact that you're a presenter and, our audiences come back.
That's a great question. So I have to say that when it comes to the sort of APA audience and our presentations, I've been really pleased with really not only just numbers, which of course we'd always like to increase, but also, the enthusiasm of the audience, of the APA audience is quite exceptional. But, considering that, our focus, our cornerstone is really these awards, and we're not really first and foremost a presenter, I find that, the audience base that we have is quite devoted. And I've been impressed considering that I've been having conversations with presenters around the country, whether that be orchestras, performing arts centers, universities, recital presenters, etc., that the audience, they are having trouble. So I feel grateful because we seem to be, doing okay in that regard. We also have a robust streaming program, which has served us quite well. Oh. I don't know that the numbers there are super high, but I know that those that are engaged are quite engaged and very vocal with us about how much they enjoy it.
I would think that's worldwide then, your viewership, doesn't it? Since the piano is what it is.
It does make it worldwide. And in fact, actually we're excited for our 2025 awards. We're going to dually stream the whole competition on Tonebase. If you're not familiar, it's quite an amazing platform of various instrumentalists and music educators. It's a subscription service that actually provides access to high-level artists giving masterclasses, and that will be a huge boost for our streaming visibility as well.
Well, knowing you, I know you have a packed schedule, and I know that coming here, you took a chunk out of your time, and I really appreciate it. Since the days I laid eyes on you, I was very excited for Indianapolis because I find, for me, Indianapolis is a great place, not only for startups, but for those who come from other places, especially metropolitan areas like LA or Chicago, New York. Rather than complain what we don't have, people tend to want to create what they left behind.
Yeah,
and this
absolutely.
is a good place to do that.
I agree.
People really embrace change. Well, not all, but many do.
Yeah, I absolutely
and I think what
agree.
you're seeing downtown where you live is representative of that attitude.
Yeah, I agree.
And everything that you're about mirrors that, I believe. So anyway, it's great, and I hope that... I hope this interview attracts folks who want to follow your activities, and
absolutely.
I hope it benefits you in some way. So thanks for coming on.
Well, thanks for having me. It's a joy and a great break for the day. So thank you for that.
I'll see you out and about.
Our thanks go out to our media sponsor, Urban Times. Urban Times is a monthly news magazine which serves as the official neighborhood newsletter for 16 Indianapolis neighborhoods, offering news about development, arts and entertainment, and from the business community.
Who will take center stage on the podcast next? Your seat on the aisle with Tom Alvarez awaits. Follow Tom on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok, and make sure to visit tomalvarez.studio. Watch Tom every other Thursday on Lifestyle Live on Wish TV, and make sure to listen every week here on the All Indiana Podcast Network.